the space efficiency, I think, for an SUV can really be taken to another level. And that's really about maximizing the cabin, maximizing and optimizing kind of floor height. Part of that is going to be certainly the proprietary technology, battery, motor, inverter, transmission, software, everything that makes an electric car move. And some of that is going to be through the versatility of active suspension, being able to bring the car down at speed, conceiving the vehicle to be optimized for aerodynamics and optimized for space packaging leads you to a certain silhouette.
So Derek, I have been busy since our last get-together at the Torrance Lucid facility.
Mm-hmm.
And now I've had extensive behind-the-wheel experience in 3 cars.
Awesome.
So put aside all the feedback. We'll talk about that offline at dinner, as well as your recent purchase, which I'm so mad about. But my big question at this point is, what's next?
Obviously, we continue to evolve Air. We have variants of Air that are going to come out, hopefully a little later this year, that we're super excited about, which is the Sapphire. We're going to get the pure variants of the car on the road. But the vast majority of the work that I've been focused on is around the Gravity program.
Which is the SUV.
Yes.
Now, before we go any further, let me ask the question, why didn't we go SUV first? Now, I personally like sedans, so understand that. Yeah. But the market wants SUVs. What was the business decision to go SUV first?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think at the very beginning we had all those conversations about, first of all, who are we as a company? Where do we want to focus? What should be our thing? We had the discussion about the SUV first. We had talked about pickup trucks. We talked about all sorts of stuff, sports cars, you know. I think the biggest factor was, you know, if you look at our mission of really advancing sustainable mobility, we knew we wanted to really focus on performance, and we wanted to focus on range, built around our own technology, our in-house technology, our in-house innovation. And as you start to look at that and you step back and say, okay, what's the format of a vehicle? What format of vehicle would best help you achieve the best range, best driving dynamics, the most harmonious handling, show off kind of more space in the vehicle, more utility than people expect. We kept circling back to a sedan, because a sedan is great for a smooth ride, quietness. It's fantastic for dynamics and handling. It's great for agility. It's awesome for aerodynamics, and all of which supported kind of our core thing. And we felt like, well, let's out of the gate, let's focus on this. It'll help us establish a position, a luxury position. We said we'll go at that first, and then we'll come at the SUV second.
Okay, so now that we have it already done, how does that launch you into SUV? Like, what have you learned moving forward so you can actually bring this thing to life?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, you know, I'm dating myself, and I found we're basically the same age, so I'm dating us.
You are older.
Okay, whatever.
Chronologically,
yes.
And the fact that you have 2 children, which
one
is in college now.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks for pointing that out. But it's interesting because, you know, if I'm going to go back to my kind of teen era, if I think about growing up in California and what was perceived as an SUV back then, the term was kind of born at that time. When I think about kind of the early Jeep Grand Cherokees, or I remember things like the early Broncos, or an International Scout. You know, these were kind of the first things that I considered kind of like an SUV, you know. I don't think we called it that, but it's fascinating if you go all the way back to kind of the singular purpose, quote unquote, off-roaders, you know, like a Jeep Willys. They were really focused on just doing a single job, right? Usually off-roading, being rugged, but they didn't do other stuff very well, you know. And as you evolve through the 60s and 70s, and get into the more kind of the 80s period, and we got the first Grand Cherokee, we got the first Range Rover. It was a little earlier than that, but it evolved and became more popularized in the 80s.
Who do you think pioneered that? Meaning, have two missions of an SUV, or what we consider an SUV in the modern day. Do you think it was Jeep with their Grand Wagoneer, or Wagoneer at that point, or the Chevy Suburban in the 50s, or the Range Rover?
There's a lot more. I don't want to leave others out. You know, you had your early Suburbans, you had your International Harvester. I don't know if you remember that vehicle. These were like those first kind of people hauler, but still truck-based, lifted type of vehicles. Certainly the Defender and Land Rover. I think it's a combination of all of them. I think Jeep deserves a lot of credit. I think that Land Rover deserves a lot of credit. And then those vehicles became kind of adapted early by like early adapters, people that maybe were looking for alternatives to the station wagons for family use, or were more adventurous. And I think in the 80s, that's where that really started to take hold. I distinctly remember kind of vehicles like the Grand Wagoneer and the Range Rover, the 80s Range Rover, really getting a foothold in Los Angeles, where people are like starting to reject the minivan and looking for cool alternatives for a family hauler. And those vehicles made a big impression, so much so my former German employer, they were already, the design team was already looking at those vehicles like, man, imagine if XYZ made a product like that, you know.
Were they thinking Porsche at that point?
No, that was Audi. Yeah, at the time. It was so way ahead of when they were actually serious about making SUVs. But and then those vehicles still were heavily compromised for road use, right? Still didn't handle great. They were heavy. They were lumbering. They were terribly inefficient. And then you evolved into the 90s, and then you got your first kind of like more civilized SUVs. That's when you got your first Lexus, your first Mercedes, your first BMW SUVs, and they were taking dynamics more in mind, and the vehicle was a little bit more tapered and tailored and a little bit more sleek.
But they were also unibody, more crossovers.
Exactly, yeah. But we called it an SUV, you know. And then you go even farther into it, and now you're getting those early coupe.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah,
Which BMW invented.
Well, there was a whole series. I call them mutations. There was a whole. It's true.
Well, I never understood them as well back in the day. When they first came out, a coupe SUV, dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
You remember? I remember distinctly when Infiniti came out with the FX45. This was like, you know, this was way ahead of its time. You know, where you really had kind of coupe-like proportions, enormous wheels pushed to the corners. It was a really dynamic shape. And you know, that car, that format now is just everywhere.
But
right?
didn't that first FX sell very well?
It did.
I remember it being everywhere.
Yeah, they were everywhere. I mean, it really brought Infiniti back on the map, I felt. Of course, the early Cayenne with Porsche, that was blasphemy at the time, and now who would have thought? Now we have a Ferrari SUV, so there you go. We got Lamborghini, we've got Aston Martin, so you know, everybody's in the game. Sports coupe, sports car, SUV, crossover. What is it all? I'm going to stop
you there. You know? Yes, everybody's in the game.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you there. And in some cases, you and I have to admit, for us to get our 992 GT3s, we have to have a Cayenne. That's what gives us the racing suspension in the front. Totally understand.
Yeah.
However, some others aren't executing as well. Like the Aston Martin might be pretty, but I don't think it's actually getting traction in the market. Where the Urus is, the Cayenne, somewhat the Bentley.
Yeah.
I think we're starting to see some sort of saturation at this point in the market.
Yeah. The term SUV and all these mutations of what we call SUV today has become a kind of catch-all for people, and I think that therein lies the success, that whether it's a more pedestrian bread and butter SUV like a Honda or a Nissan or a Mazda, you know, or something more exotic, people still have certain expectations of utility, daily use, appropriate use for all occasions. You know, they expect a lot from an SUV now. That's why I bring up the evolution from the single purpose all the way till now, where we expect an SUV to do everything, you know? And if it falls short in any way, and then maybe that's part the issue with certain more exotic SUVs. They might fall short, and therefore their appeal is narrowed down more, like a sports car. You know, and I think that brings us all the way to where we are now, as we make this transition to electrification. I think it forces you to look at the format, the concept of an SUV, much like we tried to do with Air, and rethink, like, how do we get the absolute most out of this as a segment? And since consumers are so demanding with their SUVs, because they want it to do everything really well. And electrification offers you, I think the way we're approaching it is electrification, the Lucid way, will allow us to take their current expectations to a much higher level.
That is quite a statement.
It is.
But I've known you for a long time now. No joking, all joking aside, you have delivered, especially when you were at Mazda. Give me 3 examples of how you're going to deliver on this.
I have to tie it back to Air. It's really about where we focused with Air. It was all about architecturally keeping a reasonable size footprint on the outside of the car, so not going huge with the vehicle.
When you told me that last year, I thought you were crazy. I thought it was a dumb move to not be S-Class. But now I've driven 3 of them. Totally agree, the 5 Series size car was the right way to go.
Because that's the most dynamic, easy daily use, parking.
100.
If I can give you the space of the S-Class or let's just say a D-Class, you know, the D-Class I think is, in many ways, it's kind of a dinosaur segment, you know? And it's like, no, well, I can give you a more compact, agile, even some, dare say, more youthful concept of a vehicle that has amazing handling and performance. Who wouldn't want that, you know?
Okay, so 3 points I asked for. In fairness, you know I love you. However, the packaging trick, many other people do.
Who?
Every EV manufacturer. Where like, for example, the Nissan Ariya, crazy overpriced, late to the market by years, but it still does, it has the D-Class size wheelbase in a crossover.
Okay, if you want to, okay, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt there, but I think the majority of new EVs to the market are formatted exactly like their IC counterparts, for the most part. If you were to take the dimension of the vehicle on the outside and dimension out the usable space and utility storage on the inside, you'd find that they're pretty darn close to their
certainly
IC
true of the Lexus RZ.
Yeah. Back to the point is that the space efficiency, I think, for an SUV can really be taken to another level. And that's really about maximizing the cabin, maximizing and optimizing kind of floor height and utility inside the cabin. Always going to make great use of the frunk. So there's a real opportunity there. And I think what we have on the drawing boards now really takes that to a new level.
Okay, so packaging is one thing.
Yeah.
What would be 2 other examples?
Certainly, in the spirit of Air, efficiency is king, you know, and part of that is going to be certainly the proprietary technology, battery, motor, inverter, transmission, software, everything that makes an electric car move. But it's also going to be the format of the vehicle, you know. I think there's an opportunity here to take aerodynamics in the context of an SUV to an entirely new level. And some of that is going to be through the versatility of active suspension, being able to bring the car down at speed. But it's also going to be the layout of the vehicle.
Will the car switch from the coil springs to an air system?
We are planning an air suspension, yes.
And that's only going to be on the Gravity?
I can't say. But like I said, aerodynamics and conceiving the vehicle to be optimized for aerodynamics and optimized for space packaging leads you to a certain silhouette.
And when we talk about the differences in the way that the components of the dynamics, will there be a Gravity that's an option as the base car's coils and then moving up goes to air, or will they all be air cars?
I think can't really be specific on that right now. Yeah.
Fair enough. You don't get if you don't ask in this world. You understand this
enough.
very well.
If I tell you everything,
then I won't come back.
Exactly.
Exactly. Then from a design perspective, obviously we talk about the dynamics, and now I've got the advantage of having met your counterpart on the dynamics side, David. I mean, the guy is like
amazing. He's
like,
fantastic.
He's crazy.
Yeah.
What are you doing with him in design to give him the room to make this thing off-roady?
Yeah,
or are you trying to make it like go to Moab?
Yeah,
What's the goal here?
It's not going to be a rock crawler, and let's be honest, 99% of people don't use their vehicles that way. It'll have a reasonable degree of let's call it rough road, rough weather capability. It's certainly going to be fully capable of getting up to Mammoth in a single charge from Los Angeles and doing just fine in snowy conditions like we've had.
So if you were to look at it on a spectrum, G-Wagon is up here, and old Defender's up here, and like Hyundai Kona EV is down here. Where are you guys going to be in that range?
I'd say right or your left towards the on-road.
Towards the on-road.
Yeah, of center. So we'd push towards the on-road. On-road dynamics is going to be critical for us. And we're going to be able to give the car some lift when it needs to be able to do well in snow and in conditions. But, people aren't going to want to go hardcore off-roading in this. That's not the focus.
I feel many people get confused on that. Because the reality is most of these things, people are carting the rugrats from home to school.
Yeah.
And people give like Land Rover Defender, which I think is a design icon.
It's awesome.
They have executed that vehicle beautifully. But you get the hardcore folks, and they're like, "That's a piece of crap. You can't take it off." How many of the old Defenders were taken off-road?
Right.
None.
Right.
Every one of them I know, they sit in Santa Monica and look pretty on the beach.
Yeah. Just to complete that, I just think the vast majority of people want something that looks tough, but still delivers on the daily, handles well, drives well, is sporty to drive and not lumbering. I think those things are more of a priority for most folks. And it's certainly, you have your hardcore adventure folks and weekend warriors, and they need more from the vehicle. And that's why we have an amazing array of more rugged vehicles at the other end of the spectrum. Oftentimes they don't make the greatest EVs because you pay for efficiency, and so you're not going to get the range out of these massive battery packs. So you start to question the value there. But I think EVs make great off-roaders also.
You guys, again, now with the experience I've had with your cars, the huge battery pack is amazing. Like I've really used it to its full advantage, and I shouldn't have done this the week I had the car. I probably DC charged it 3 times. Don't tell Dave Butchko, he'll never give me a car again. But are you going to even go to a bigger size battery in a Gravity?
That's not the intent.
So you still stay around 112 to 118 tops.
Peter talks a lot about smart range, and we want to be able to get the greatest range possible out of a not gigantic battery, because at a certain point, the goal is how far can we go on a kilowatt of power, not how much power can we carry in the car. That's got to be the focus, and that's where efficiency is absolutely the wins out over just putting a big pack in the car. Anybody can put a bigger pack in a car. The car gets heavier. Then you have to beef up the suspension, and you make the wheels taller, and now it's less aerodynamic, and then you have to put more batteries in it. It's a never-ending spiral of inefficiency.
So did you, David, and Peter sit down and say, we want to put a cap on the weight? And if so, what is that cap?
I think we had targets for weight, and we're continuing to noodle out as much as we possibly can.
Because you're at 5,200 pounds now, and now you're adding air ride, a bigger vehicle.
Exactly.
Most people outside of the U.S. that don't own a business won't understand this. Will I be able to write the thing off on my taxes in the first year?
Yeah, we won't get into that, but suffice it to say, weight is always an enemy. And we're keenly aware that in period, electric cars are heavy. And that will improve over time as battery energy density improves. That will come down, or if there's some other innovation. But with Gravity, what was important was not to make the car too large, and really try to cap the size.
Is the wheelbase going to be the same as the Air?
The wheelbase is larger than the Air, but the car is not significantly longer than the Air.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, we kind of gotten away from the original question. Was there anything you had to do in design other than wheel well space to give David some breathing room to make this thing a utility vehicle?
I think probably the biggest thing was just, much like with Air, we're always trying to push the driver and passenger as far forward as possible, and the rear occupants, in this case second and third row, farther back, and get that big couple distance between the rows. That's what gives you your overall space. And we always measure space from your front foot all the way back to the rear H point, or the rear, let's just say the rear of the rear seat.
The third row seat.
Yes, in this case, the third row seat cushion. That represents the full space that's occupiable. And so, of course, we're trying to push that front driver farther forward, and at a certain point, you come up against the wheel envelope. So we had to really find the optimal position for driver, front wheel envelope, and obviously a comfortable seating position for a broad spectrum of people.
Your car has been around now for a bit, and I was taken by how many people, A, know what it is, and B, know the history of the company. I had multiple people come up to me and say, thank you for buying a Lucid and supporting the company. I own the stock, very proudly.
Yes.
But I think that also brings about, there's some unique aspects of your design, specifically the front clip, the rear clip, and I would argue your daylight opening.
Yes.
Are there aspects of the Air design that kind of like the BMW grille has to make it through the family and be on every car?
100%,
Is that what aspects are going to make it to Gravity?
Yeah. I'll start out by saying, first of all, it's really important that Air and Gravity have a strong sibling connection. They're clearly two different types of vehicle, but they will have a very strong connection. Probably the strongest is the unique kind of nose blade, DRL front end, the simplicity of the front end I'm really proud of with Air. It has that kind of speed form bullet quality, and very simple and pure. Gravity will have, let's call it a version of that, but like a tougher version of it. Certainly you said the daylight opening, and that's another term for kind of the cabin concept, will be unique in many ways, and tie back to Air, but it is different. And certainly the kind of rear end signature.
So not Russian nesting dolls. It'll
Definitely
have its own
not.
personality.
No, it's definitely its own thing. Yeah.
Okay, so you've been on the show before. You know this is the point of the episode where we turn this around to the audience to solicit their feedback. And I'm going to let you choose what feedback do you want. I would assume something about the Gravity, but what specifically do you want to hear from the audience on?
Oh gosh.
I know, no pressure at all.
Yeah. I mean, with Gravity, people are going to have to just simply wait and see. But I would love to hear people's honest reactions the first time they saw Lucid Air on the road. Because one of the things that I'm super fascinated by is people like come to me when I meet them for the first time. They'll say, "Well, I had one impression of the car from seeing it online, but after I saw it on the road, ... I'd love to hear that feedback.
Okay, you heard the man. Let us know in the comments below or via our social media, MotoMan TV, all one word, MotoMan TV, all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, if you got value out of this episode, I would greatly appreciate you sharing this with all your friends on your socials. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.